Alright everyone, chapter 18 of the Jojolands was absolutely insane, and for a lot of reasons. But first, there's something pretty cool I want to talk about regarding this cover over here. We see our current two antagonists, Lulu and Bobby Jean. But the main thing I want to talk about with this chapter cover is Bobby Jean's pose, because it is absolutely amazing. I saw a lot of parallels to the Turkish guy from the Olympics who had that really cool pose, shooting a gun without any equipment, and Araki basically drew this famous frame as Bobby Jean, and the comparison works really well here. It's honestly crazy how well the timing of the Olympics aligned with the characters of Bobby Jean and Lulu being the current villains that our gang is facing, and yeah, Bobby Jean having this pose is pretty accurate. He's also a gunman who doesn't need to have any equipment to make a good shot, mainly because of his stand being so good he doesn't necessarily need a direct aim for it. So displaying him in this pose as the Olympian is pretty cool. Honestly, let's stay on the topic of Bobby Jean, as there is something that's pretty important that was mentioned in this chapter that I don't find too common in the rest of JoJo. There's something really unique about Bobby Jean that's really cool to me. When speaking to Lulu about the idea of adopting her, Bobby Jean mentioned that he already has a wife and a couple of kids of his own. But in my own memories of most JoJo villains in the series, how often is it that a villain character at that, is already shown to have a wife and kids? In previous parts, to me it felt like all the villains that our main gang has fought were just their own humans, like independent of themselves, and down to do anything they want. But this is the first time, maybe one of the few rare times, that we get characterization that the villain we're fighting has a real life outside of what they're doing for the villains. We did see this aspect a bit in the parts right before this, like all of the rock humans did have some other secondary job, and Golden Wind was everyone being mafiosos. One backstory that kind of reminds me of this is Risotto, who had a real background with family members involved. But yeah, I'm having a tough time thinking of other characters who had something like this, like a wife and children, that aren't really main villains themselves. This is a really nice change to see from Araki, that he is now putting a big emphasis on making these one-time villain characters of themselves as well, like making them feel like actual humans and not just lackeys for the main villain, but people with their own desires and tasks to do. It's really nice to see from Araki. Or maybe this family aspect of Bobby Jean could be some foreshadowing that Bobby Jean is going to become an ally. I mean, usually when you give a character something like this, it could be because Bobby Jean is going to become an ally and you can relate to him in his life and everything. But yeah, it could be that Araki is just taking more care for his one-time villains over the years, just like how my Discord server members have been having fun over there for many years at this point. But enough with the villains, let's talk about our main gang, Team JoJo, and what they could do at the start of the chapter. The end of the last chapter shows a lot of them getting destroyed by a flurry of bullets, and that continues into this chapter. However, we did see something cool. We saw each member of the group being able to deal with the problem of the bullet, but each in their own separate and cool ways. We see Paco getting help from Dragona to remove the bullets using smooth operators. Something that I didn't really take note of last chapter was that Dragona didn't get hit by any of the bullets. This is because Paco saved Dragona by putting his arm up and protecting them from the bullets. So this whole time, Dragona was just fine. But I guess this works because it might have been that the Hustle could grab the bullets but couldn't exactly let go, maybe due to how Bobby Jean's bullets work. With Dragona taking care of Paco, Charming Man and JoJo had to work for themselves, and they were able to successfully, with Charming Man being able to disintegrate the parts of his body that had the bullets, and JoJo was able to let November Rain wash away the bullet when it entered his mouth. It's nice since it shows that these guys aren't dependent on one member, like say everyone needing Giorno to heal them or something. They can each do something to tackle a problem problem on their own, besides Paco in this case, but hey, he definitely makes it up later on in the chapter, and maybe even the whole fight itself. And of course, this once again helps with the vibe that these guys weren't always a group, and that they only recently got along besides Jodio and Dragona, and kind of Paco as well. Wait, we're still talking about Bobby Jean because that gun was his stand. So yeah, just when he left the conversation, he really never did, because this chapter was able to give us a more refined definition of Bobby Jean's stand Glory Days and what it exactly does. Since before this, all we saw was a gunshot and then a lot of bullets. But the truth is, these bullets are actually really slow. Now, this was hard to show last chapter, but I think Araki did a really good way of displaying this in this chapter. There's definitely the issue of this being in a manga format, that it would be hard to display that the gunshots are slow, but I think the characters mentioning this, and the way Araki was able to draw the bullets spinning in what looks like a slow manner, he was really able to show that these are slow bullets. It really shows us how good of a mangaka Araki really is, and that he's learned from past mistakes on dealing with the disadvantages of the manga format. King Crimson was kind of confusing in the manga because representing skipped time in a format that always has a skipped time in the panels was really hard, but it's nice to know that over 25 years later, Araki was able to figure out something to do to solve this issue. But yeah, Glory Days is a really cool stand, as cool as the 8.3% of my audience subscribe to my channel. But something else that's also cool is the new characterization we got from Paco. In this chapter, we learned that Paco is someone with military experience and got released for dishonorable discharge. This adds some really interesting background to the character of Paco, something I wanted to see a lot of. With Jodio, Dragona, and Charming Man getting pretty detailed backstories, Paco and Usagi are currently the characters we know the least about, and Usagi is not feeling well. So it's nice that we're getting some sort of backstory with Paco. And honestly, this kind of makes sense. For those who remember, chapter 1 of the Jojolands, we saw that Paco had to leave for 6 months for some unknown reason. Maybe this is the reason why. He went off for military duties. But this also brings up the question why he got a dishonorable action. How much did he have to mess up to get put away in 6 months? Probably stealing some valuable things here and there. It's pretty hard to tell right now, but it is fitting of Paco. I really like this military background, and hopefully there could be something of it later on in the part. Like maybe he sees something like military related and he gets flashbacks or whatever. But now we have to talk about the biggest and best panel of this chapter. This one right here. This is amazing. I've seen so many people talk about how great of a panel it is, and I have to agree. My jaw dropped when I saw this panel, and I just had to look at it for a while. Having what looks to be all 4 major parties of this battle, Lulu, Bobby Jean, Paco, and Jodio to the side, all being here is just crazy to see. Bobby Jean having Glory Days right behind his back looks really cool. He's ready to fight at any moment, and it's just like, wow, man. Araki really cooked with this. Lulu is a bit interesting as well, having the doll in her hand and holding Bobby Jean's hand with her other hand. They just look like a normal father and daughter to their perspective of Paco and Jodio, but right behind them, you could see how scary they truly are. Paco looks great here as well. We see him with a semi-worried expression, but nothing too accusatory. He's just trying to get on the elevator and is looking at people who he would not know are the villains that they're dealing with. He's just kind of looking at them. And Jodio is in a pretty similar way, just noticing Lulu and Bobby Jean not really doing anything. It's just a really great panel to draw, and it looks amazing. But there was a 5th person in this panel, and someone who kind of interests me. That being this random woman who was shown a little bit during this panel, and a bit beforehand. She first appeared in the elevator right before Lulu and Bobby Jean did, with a random patient and nurse. Nothing out of the ordinary here, but it kind of looked like she was just a random background character, though her design, in my opinion, doesn't show that. Araki kind of shows important characters in a different way towards background characters who aren't meant to do anything. I see that in this woman. One might say she has an aura to her that was different to the others. But yeah, after this, she appeared in a couple of panels. One that I noticed especially is a panel where she is looking directly at Paco. Who is she? Why is she interested in Paco? And why does her character specifically show up in the background of a bunch of these panels? I really want to know. Maybe she could be another member of the Howler Agency, or she could just be a random person Araki decided to draw a couple more times. But what wasn't random was the hustle. With Paco in the elevator, we see multiple bullets targeting specifically him. And due to this, Paco used the hustle to get a part of the elevator to ball him up and shield him from the bullets. With the bullets ricocheting all over the place, surely one was gonna go somewhere, right? And we see this sadly, well, maybe not sadly, but tragically happened to Mack, who was the main banker who was involved with Howler the last chapter. It's a really interesting death that could mean a lot for the part. We see him once again bad-mouthing Howler, mentioning how he's probably in utter shock right now. What interests me about all of this is how the death actually took place. After being all happy and stuff about needing to get his assets, but as fast as possible, then he talked about a stomach ache, one that was hurting bad enough that he decided to want to go and get medicine for it. And then it just so happened that when he got out, that there was a singular bullet that flew from Paco's exchange previously, and just the perfect spot to shoot Mack in the head, killing him instantly. Now this type of luck, or unluckiness, is crazy, and it certainly reminds me of something else. I genuinely felt like I was explaining A Wonder of You Calamity, which is crazy because Toru's been dead for a decade. What interests me here is that Mack dropped what looks to be some really important papers, maybe the documents to Howler's land or something like that. Could this be the power of the lava rock? Is the lava rock just some other version of Wonder of You that can bring calamities just away from the user? This would be absolutely broken. I honestly think what's going to happen is that our Jojolands gang will get access to these documents once they finish fighting Lulu and Bobby Jean. They'll be leaving the hospital and just, oh, look at these important papers on the floor. Or maybe someone else will pick it up and go to the hospital with it and then suffer another calamity so that our gang can pick up those papers. All that's known is that this ability of the lava rock is absolutely broken, and we could definitely see why Howler would want this. And speaking of which, where was Howler? It's been really unfortunate that we got to see a couple of stuff about Howler last chapter, just for him to only be mentioned this one time in the chapter. He didn't even get an actual appearance. I really wanted to see some more of him, and especially if he is truly the main villain of Jojolands. But I guess it makes sense to drip feed us information about him instead of giving us everything about him right away if he truly is the main villain. That's actually a good point. Is Howler even the main villain of the Jojolands? Well, watch this video for my input on this situation.